My father set the moving box on the kitchen table the same way he'd set down a bag of feed. No ceremony, no eye contact, like the thing inside was already gone. He'd had it folded flat behind the water heater, waiting. That's what got me. Not that they wanted me out, but that they'd kept the box ready. Tessa and Marcus need a real room, he said, working the flaps open. They're getting serious. It makes sense for them to take yours. My mother stood by the stove with her hands folded, wearing the soft voice she uses right before she takes something. Your sister needs this house more than you do, Sloane. She said it like a kindness. That was always her trick. She could hand you a wound wrapped in a blanket and look hurt when you bled. It was a Thursday in October. I'd lost the biggest contract of my year that morning. And my family's only question, asked before I'd even cleared the porch light, was who'd cover Tessa's car payment now. They had no idea what I'd been building 2.5 hours over the ridge. They had no idea whose name was on the deed to a log lodge up on Lake Tamsin, the one they'd lost half their minds trying to find a venue near. By Christmas, every quiet thing I'd been holding up for them would be lying on the floor where they dropped it. Welcome back to Burned Bridges Club, where the people who only ever knocked when they wanted something finally find the door locked from the inside. If a story's ever made you set your jaw, stay with me. Drop a comment and subscribe before the part they never saw coming. My name is Sloane Keller. I'm 38, and I restore old timber buildings for a living. Log lodges, hand-hewn barns, lake cabins the winters have tried to kill. I started Lantern Hill Restoration with a borrowed chainsaw and a smoking truck and built it into something with my own 2 hands. So when my biggest client called that Thursday to say his developer had filed Chapter 11 and the whole Lake Tamsin cabin package was dead, I didn't fall apart. A third of my year, gone in a 4-minute call. I sat in my office above the hardware store in Eldridge Falls and looked at the number a long time, then closed the laptop. I've rebuilt roof lines that caved under 40 years of snow. I could rebuild a third. What stung wasn't the money. It was knowing I had nobody to tell. My family thought I did construction. Close enough. I let them keep thinking it. I made the drive I made every Thursday, the long climb over the ridge to Coalport, the faded mill town where I grew up. I'd slept in my childhood room for almost 2 years, since my dad threw a clot in his leg and somebody had to hold the house together while he mended. In my family, somebody has always meant me. When I pulled in, there were 2 extra trucks at the curb. My cousin Gabe's flatbed and the loud diesel that belonged to Marcus, my sister's boyfriend. In our family, company on a weeknight meant a decision had already been made about me, and I'd be last to hear it. Let me back the truck up, because the box didn't come out of nowhere. For 15 years, I'd been the wall that house leaned on. When the property taxes on the Coalport place quietly slipped 2 years behind, I caught them up. When the homeowner's insurance lapsed, I covered the gap before anyone noticed. When Tessa wanted a newer SUV and her credit couldn't carry it, my mother put a pen in my hand and I co-signed, because a repossession on that loan would have wrecked the credit I needed to run my own company. I set one condition the day I signed. Tessa makes her own payments after 6 months, I said. My mother waved it off. She's just getting on her feet. She never got on her feet because nobody ever once let her hit the ground. And me, I was the one who never needed catching. In that house, you don't break Sloane wasn't a compliment. It was a job description. It meant I was the one nobody had to think about. Here's the itemized version, the one I kept in my head on the drive over. Year 1, I paid the back taxes, $1,100, never mentioned again. Year 3, I co-signed Tessa's loan. $415 a month, I ended up covering myself. Year 5, I replaced the well pump so my parents would have water through the winter. Tessa got a trip to Nashville that same year, and I got a text asking why I hadn't sent more. People always ask why my mother loved my sister more. It isn't simple, and I won't pretend it is. Before Tessa was born, my mother carried twins she lost late, and she never spoke of it. After that, she built her whole self around the daughter who lived, and decided I was the sturdy one who didn't need worrying over. I understand where it came from. It never once made it weigh less. The only person in that house who ever saw me clearly was my grandmother, Gran Edith. She lived in the back bedroom now, turning 85 in November. Her whole world shrunk down to a chair and a window. When I was small, she used to pull me close and say, "You were never the strong one to me, baby. You were just the only one who ever showed up." That's the real reason I drove that highway for 2 years. Not for my mother. For the old woman in the back room who still knew my name. I picked up the box myself that night. I didn't argue. I set my grandmother's old button jar on top of my folded shirts, and I felt the cold weight of a key ring in my jacket pocket I had never once explained to anyone under that roof. I didn't explain it then either. "You're not throwing me out," I said, quiet. "I'm choosing the door." For a second, my father's hands went still. Then my mother said, "Don't make a scene," and he went back to folding, and I carried the box out and shut the door behind me on my own. I drove the Ridge back to the lake that same night, the box rattling on the back seat. I didn't cry. I was busy doing math. Priya, my partner, was still at the shop when I came in carrying it. She took one look and set down her coffee. "You finally left that house." "They left me," I said. I just stopped arguing about it. That first night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee and pulled the threads loose one at a time. The auto pay for the Coalport taxes ran out of my account. 2 clicks, gone. The insurance, the same. Tessa's car payment I'd been silently covering, gone. And I texted her in plain words that it was hers now. It took an hour to draw a line through every standing thing I quietly paid for that house. When I finished, the whole quiet machine I'd been running for those people had stopped. They threw me out at supper. By midnight, the floor under them had started to give, and not one of them knew it. If you've ever been the wall a family leaned on until you cracked, you know what I felt driving away. Stay with me, because the part where it turns is close. For 3 days, Coalport went silent. No call from my mother. Tessa posted a photo of my old room with a caption about finally getting her space. On the 4th morning, Gabe called. He's the only one in that family who tells the truth without being asked. "A letter came to the house," he said, "from the credit union. Your aunt opened it by mistake, and your mom about took her head off. Sloane, it had your name on it." Something cold settled behind my ribs. "What kind of letter?" "Loan paperwork. Delinquent. Some debt consolidation thing against the Coalport house." He went quiet. "I figured you set it up." "I never set up any loan, Gabe." A longer quiet. "Then you've got a problem, because your name's on it." I thanked him and hung up and sat very still while the whole shape of it landed. A year back, a strange letter had come to that house addressed to me from a lender I didn't recognize. I'd asked my mother, she called it junk mail, and I let it go. I'd caught the smell of smoke and reached for the alarm, and the door had been locked from a side I couldn't reach. It came out over the next 2 days, in pieces, the way these things do. 2 years ago, my mother had taken out a loan against the Coalport house to bankroll Tessa and Marcus, the wedding talk. Marcus's truck, his can't-miss business idea. Her own credit was thin, so she used the only strong name attached to that family, the one she already had on paper from the Carco sign. My signature. My social. She forged me onto the application as a co-borrower. I never saw it. I never signed it. But on that document, I was on the hook. The house they boxed me out of had been standing on my name the whole time. I didn't panic. Panic is for people who've never watched a foundation fail. I just got very, very calm. I called my lawyer Beth the next morning, and we went at it like a job site, from the bottom up. We set the forged signature beside my real one, and the difference was plain to anyone with eyes. We logged the application date against where I'd actually been that week, a barn raising 3 counties away with a dozen witnesses. Then we filed the slow, unglamorous things that actually hold up: a fraud dispute, an identity theft affidavit, a police report. Beth was blunt with me. This is a strong fraud claim, but the bank has to investigate, and that can run for months. What we're disputing is whether you're liable at all. If the forgery holds, you come off it, and they go after whoever actually spent the money. I sat with that, naming my mother, putting in writing that she'd forged me onto a loan. A year ago, I'd have eaten the debt to keep the peace, the way I always had. Not this time. File all of it, I said. While that ground forward, I started building the other thing, the thing I'd been too afraid to draw up for 4 years. Because here's what none of them knew. 4 years ago, a log lodge came up at a county tax auction. Half ruined, the dock collapsed into the shallows, the roof opened to the sky. I emptied my savings and bought it. It was the lake lodge my grandmother and grandfather built the year they married, the one place she ever truly loved, lost when the mill closed and the bad years came. Every weekend for 4 years, while my family thought I was off at a job site, I drove up to Lake Tamsin and rebuilt it with my own hands. One Saturday that fall, I was prying out a rotted section of chimney corner. Hand-hewn logs nobody had moved in 70 years when something dropped out of the cavity and hit the subfloor. A brass cocoa tin, dented at the seams. I sat down on the floor and worked it open. Inside were photographs. Curled and brown. My grandmother young, my grandfather with his arm around her, the dock new and white behind them, and under the photos, a sheet of paper folded into a hard little square, her handwriting, a list. Across the top, before I'm done. Most of it was small. See the cousins once more. Make peace with Russ. And at the very top, underlined twice so hard the pen had nearly torn through. Hear the loons at first light from a dock that's mine. She'd sealed that tin inside the wall the year they built the place, and it had waited there through the foreclosure and the new owners and the long ruin, because not one of them ever went down to the bone of the house. Until I did. I called Beth back. I want to set up a life estate, I told her. My grandmother lives in this house for the rest of her life. No rent, no conditions. I keep the ownership, but the right to live there is hers until she's gone. It was clean and legal, and nobody could argue me out of it because the house was mine to give. Then the lake handed me the rest of the plan. An inquiry came in through the Lantern Hill events page, where I rented the lodge out when it sat empty. Someone wanted it for a family birthday party. I almost didn't read the name. When I did, I read it twice. The booking was from a Diane Keller. My mother had gone online looking for somewhere photogenic to throw Gran Edith's 85th, somewhere that would look good in front of the cousins. And the site had handed her my lodge. The restored photos looked nothing like the ruin the family remembered. She didn't know it was her own mother's lost house, and she had no idea it was mine. She's trying to rent your house, Priya said, reading over my shoulder. To throw a party in the house her mother lost, that she doesn't know you own. There was a version where I fired back a text and watched her squirm in private. But what she'd done to me hadn't been private. She boxed me out in front of a neighbor and a sister who never looked up, so I'd settle it the way she did. Out loud, in a full room, with witnesses. Take the booking, I told Priya. Under the company name. Leave mine off it. My mother paid the deposit without a second look. People like her never ask who's holding the thing up. They just enjoy standing on it. My father called the week before the party. He never calls. Sloane, he said, and then a long quiet, the kind he fills a room with. That night with the box wasn't right. I shouldn't have packed your things. I waited. I'd waited 2 years for him to say one true sentence, and I wasn't going to rush it. Your mother said it was best for everyone. I went along. I always go along. That is the thing about you, Dad, I said. Not cruel, just true. There's a letter about a loan, he said. Your mother won't tell me what's in it. She says your name's on it. It is. She put it there without asking me. The line went quiet long enough that I thought he'd hung up. I didn't know, he finally said. I believe you, I told him. You never know anything in that house. You make sure of it. It was a hard thing to say to my own father. But he'd earned the hearing of it. And when he asked if I was coming to Gran's birthday, I said, I'm coming. More than you know. I didn't explain. But I let myself hope, just a little, that a man who'd spent 60 years keeping his head down might once stand up straight. The party was set for a Saturday at dusk. The cousins drove in from 3 counties. My mother arrived in her good dress, already smiling for an audience, already the hostess of a house she thought she'd rented. They wheeled Gran Edith up the gravel path in a borrowed chair, and I watched her face the whole way. She looked at the lodge the way you look at a word you can't quite place. Then the porch came full into view, the new rail, the strung lights, the windows catching the last of the sun, and she stopped. Her hand came up to her mouth. Russ, she whispered to my father, who was pushing the chair. Russ, this is my house. My father went still. He had grown up coming to the dock. He looked at the lodge, then slowly at me at the top of the steps, and something crossed his face I'd never once seen. My mother breezed past all of it. She turned to the cousins, the church friends, Aunt Lorraine, and lifted her voice into the role she loved best. I wanted Mama's 85th to be special, she announced. So I found this gorgeous place right on the water. Wasn't easy, let me tell you. But nothing's too good for my mother. A few people clapped. Tessa, near the cooler with Marcus, smiled like the praise was partly hers. My mother was glowing now, the morning's bank letter fear buried under the warmth of a crowd. This was her medicine, to be seen as the woman who provided. I let her have it. I let her gather the whole party into the story and stand at the center of it, certain she'd won. Then, when she paused for the admiration to settle, I stepped into the middle of the lawn and said, in a voice that didn't need to be loud, Mom, you didn't rent this house. The lawn went quiet the way a lake goes quiet right before the wind turns. What do you mean? I paid the deposit. The company you booked through is mine, I said. Lantern Hill, the one you paid. And this lodge is mine. I bought it 4 years ago at a county auction, the same house Gran and Grandpa built and lost. It was a ruin. I emptied my savings, and I've been rebuilding it with my own hands every weekend since. My mother's mouth opened and shut. You do construction. I own a restoration company. I've owned it for years. None of you ever asked. You only ever wanted to know what I could do for you. And then she did what she always does when the ground moves under her. She got loud. You bought our family's house and you hid it? You let me make a fool of myself? After everything we did for you, this is your revenge? The cousins watched her come apart. The louder she got, the smaller her story became. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. It isn't revenge, Mom, I said quietly. It's just the truth, standing up in a room you can't talk it out of. I crossed to my grandmother's chair and crouched to her level, the folder in my hand. Gran, I brought your house back, and I'm not just giving it to you for today. I opened the folder and showed her the deed, her name typed clean across the life estate. This says you live here for the rest of your life. No rent, no conditions. The loons at first light, off your own dock. The way you wrote it. The way you hid it in the wall for me to find. Her hands shook as she took it. She read it once, then again, then pressed it to her chest and made a sound I'd never heard her make, half a laugh and half a sob. My house, she said. My own house. My mother found her voice. You can't just, we're family. That house should be The entitlement was so naked, it embarrassed the cousins to hear it. "You don't break, Sloane," she tried, reaching for the old refrain like a coin she'd always flipped to heads. "You can carry this. We can't." I let her see the coin didn't land anymore. "You told me Tessa needed a house more than I did," I said. "You were just wrong about which house and which person. Gran needed this one more than this family ever did." And then my father moved. Russ, who'd spent his whole life keeping his head down, walked past my mother, put his hand on Gran Edith's shoulder, looked at me, and said, his voice rough, "She's right. Sloane's right about all of it." My mother turned to him like he'd betrayed her. He didn't look away this time. "Diane," he said, "enough." It was the first time I'd ever heard him tell her enough. The party came apart under its own weight. Cousins drifted toward the cake. Aunt Lorraine started asking my mother questions she couldn't answer. Marcus edged toward the parking area. Tessa sat on the steps a long while before she left and said, "I didn't know about the loan." It wasn't much, but it was the first true thing she'd said to me in years. The fraud dispute ground on for months, and nothing about it was guaranteed. But I'd stopped quietly carrying it, and what my mother had actually signed, she'd answer for herself. Tessa's SUV got repossessed on a Tuesday with no one left to cover it, and the wedding talk went quiet. I felt a hard, complicated thing watching it from across the ridge. Not joy exactly, more like watching a building you warned everyone about finally settle the way you said it would. I hadn't pushed anything over. I just stopped standing where the wall used to be. When the last car crunched out of the gravel, I wheeled Gran Edith to the edge of the dock, and we sat as the dark came down and the loons started up across the water. She held the deed in her lap the whole time. "First morning I'll wake up somewhere that's mine," she said. Took 85 years. "It's yours now," I told her. "Every one of them from here on." She found my hand, and we listened to the loons, and nothing else needed saying. Gran lived in the lodge, and I drove up most weekends the way I used to drive to Coalport. Except now, the road led toward someone who was glad to see me. My father came alone once, sat on the dock, and didn't say much, which from him was a whole speech. People still ask if I feel guilty cutting my family off. I tell them what I finally worked out. For 15 years, I was the load-bearing beam in a house that gave all its warmth to someone else. A beam can't hold up a room it's not standing in. I'm done being the thing that keeps other people's roofs from falling. I'd rather be the lake, the place you have to come to, that owes you nothing and was here long before you arrived. So if you've ever been the steady one, the open wallet, the name they used without asking, hear me. A boundary isn't you slamming the door on people you love. It's you finally deciding who gets a key. Give yourself the first one. That's my story. One layoff, one folded box of shirts, and a lake lodge a family tried to take from the woman who'd already bought it back. If this reminded you that your kindness was never a debt you owe forever, take that as your sign. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.